Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
When a lot of people think of creatives, they think of people like painters, or they think of people like graphic design artists or stuff like that, or things like that. And I honestly believe that culinary is, one of the biggest attributes to the creative industry that gets overlooked. And so hence the term culinary arts, because it is an art form for people like me and Justin, and we're creating edible art.
Don't be afraid to pivot and be creative, and just think outside the box. During this time, people want so many different things, they just don't know it yet, and you're just trying to intrigue anyone and everyone to come eat at your restaurant or get takeout and feel that sense of security and that comfort from your food.
One of the biggest things that I've seen is that pivot point. And so even when COVID first started and I was working with Bait, we are a fine dining restaurant. And so for us having to, package up our artistic plating or whatever it may be into a plastic container was quite difficult for us. And so just being able to pivot and make that pivot, you can definitely tell has impacted a lot of restaurants.
I'm Sarah Fenske, and this is St. Louis on the Air. Juwan Rice and Justin McMillen are two of Sauce Magazine's ones to watch. They've had very different journeys, and we'll hear about those in a minute. But first, we're joined by one of the journalists behind the list. That is Sauce Magazine's executive editor, Meera Nagarajan. Meera, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So what was it like putting this list together this year of all years? Did you find that a lot of the people under consideration were switching jobs or pivoting even as you were putting this together?
It's funny because we look at our ones to watch list sometimes for years. And people will stay on our radar and we'll just kind of follow them along and see what they're up to. So a lot of these people, when we first started watching them, they were doing something totally different. And where they landed now is, a little bit of a growth pattern that we've been paying attention to. So yeah, they've all changed since we started watching them. And we think that they're all doing incredibly amazing and different things.
Well, we actually have two of those honorees here today. Juwan Rice is the youngest rising star on this list. He's the former executive sous chef at the Central West End hotspot Bait. He's also the founder of JR's Gourmet. And here's the crazy part. He is just 19 years old. Juwan Rice, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We're also joined today by a star who's been rising for a little bit of time now. Justin McMillen is an experienced chef. He recently served as chef de cuisine at Sydney Street Cafe. And these days, he's the director of culinary operations for the Niche Food Group, which includes Brasserie, Pastoria, Cinder House, and other top-rated restaurants. So, Justin, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Justin, I want to start with you. What first got you cooking?
A lot of just growing up from a really small rural town in Indiana, and both my grandmothers loved to cook and my dad really loved to hunt, and we had a farm, and so just kind of got really used to, canning, tomatoes and corn, or having venison or squirrel or rabbit for my dad, and of course the whole Food Network boom craze, but also the old PBS shows of Justin Wilson and Martha Stewart at the time and things like that. So it was definitely very family-oriented of my development of food.
So you're from a much different neck of the woods than St. Louis here. What brought you to the so-called big city, in this case, St. Louis?
During culinary school, we had an opportunity to do our externship, and we could go, all over the world. And my brother at the time was living in St. Louis, still does. But that's free room and board. So the Renaissance Grand Hotel downtown at the moment, they had an opportunity for an externship for 3 months. So I decided to take that. And lo and behold, after I left the externship, I worked in Indiana for a couple of years, but St. Louis kind of drew me back. And I lived there for about 8 years, and then before I moved out to California.
So, Juwan, your story is much different. You're from St. Louis. What got you started cooking here?
So I've been cooking since I was 6 years old, and it kind of started the same way a lot of chefs start, cooking in the kitchen with my grandma. And so my grandma's house was always the hot spot during the holiday season, so like Thanksgiving and Easter and Christmas and stuff. So I would always come over and help her do simple tasks like peeling potatoes or, whatever it may be at a young age. And that's kind of what got me started into the look of culinary.
So I got to ask, what led you to start a business? This was JR's Gourmet, which you're still at the helm of, when you were just 14.
Yeah, so I started doing small treats and desserts and stuff like cookies and stuff like that. And so my mom would always take my treats and stuff that I would make at home to work. And so it kind of got so big that she was, I was catering for their potlucks and stuff like that. And people were asking always, how much would you charge to do this? And so from that, I kind of saw that there was a need for it. And it was something that I could make money doing. And so at that stage, that's when I started ordering like business cards and came up with the name and the direction that I wanted to go in. And ever since then, it's been a hit.
Man, I feel like such a late bloomer. You're ordering business cards at 14. Justin, you also sort of took a leap of faith and went and did something that was outside the ordinary. But in your case, this was after you were at Sydney Street. This involved leaving this great restaurant, a James Beard Award winner, to go to California and start a restaurant there. What compelled you to take that leap?
At the time, I was getting ready to turn 30 years old, and I felt like I needed one more like beat down of what you so-called the restaurant industry, the beat down. And we got to meet Chef Kyle because he came to eat at Sydney Street and the Peacemaker. And lucky enough, me and my girlfriend, wife at the time, wife now, moved out there and helped open up a Single Thread, which, I think as a young culinarian, especially going into culinary school and just watching TV, when you see Michelin chefs or restaurants, these aspirations, or life goals kind of come into play. But coming from like Indiana or just being in St. Louis for those few years prior to moving out there, I never really thought I'd, ended up working there. And so that was definitely a huge challenge, a huge treat, and it paid off really well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this restaurant you opened, it got a Michelin star during your tenure there. What made you come back to the Midwest after that?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
3 Michelin stars, sorry.
Oh, yes, that's a huge correction. I am so glad you set me straight on that. So 3 stars, that's even huger. What made you come back to the Midwest after that acclaim?
We were there for 3 years, and at the time I proposed to my girlfriend, and so we wanted to get married back in St. Louis because we thought it was a nice medium of for our family and friends that we had in St. Louis, for her family in Chicago, my family in Indiana to come to. And, we looked elsewhere. We looked in Tennessee and Kentucky for jobs once we moved back, but there was something drawing us towards St. Louis. We just felt more at home. We felt more at ease of reconnecting with friends, reconnecting with the restaurant industry.
Well, we're glad we got you back. Juwan, I want to follow up on the thread of your story. In addition to JR's Gourmet that you started at 14, you're still running, you found your way to Bait, and that's such a great restaurant, seafood, Central West End. Was it hard to take direction from Sierra Jackson, the chef there, after you'd gotten used to running your own show and, having this business all of your own?
So it was definitely different. It wasn't the first restaurant that I worked in. I've worked in a couple different restaurants and country clubs and stuff, but the environment was really different. It was more of a chill environment. So it was kind of like I was just cooking with friends the whole time. So it was really laid back. But it was an awesome experience.
Yeah. Few restaurants can say it just feels chill and laid back, especially a popular one like that. It sounds like you got some great grounding there.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And just the overall environment at the restaurant, it's kind of a at-home environment, even in the restaurant. So that transpired in the kitchen as well.
So once the pandemic shut down restaurants, you sort of refocused efforts on JR's Gourmet. What were you doing through that in this past year?
Yeah, so I opened up JR's Gourmet for curbside pickup. And so we were doing a lot of, curbside dinners and lunches and stuff like that. And then further down the line, I kind of saw a need for healthcare workers that needed, meals to amp up their day. And so a lot of times these healthcare workers were, spending 12 hours plus a day at their, wherever they reside at. And so we kind of switched our efforts to the healthcare industry. And so we kind of took on a lot of different local hospitals and a lot of nursing homes and stuff like that, just to kind of provide meals for the people that were overlooked during the pandemic.
I understand you did that through a nonprofit, Feeding the Frontline. That's amazing. So you weren't just in it for the business. This was a nonprofit venture.
Yeah. So 100% of the proceeds went directly into providing the meals for these workers. And it was very encouraging for me just to see how impactful something as simple as a meal could, go along and, brighten up someone's week.
So, Justin, your pandemic experience has been different than that, in that a lot of the niche restaurants have been able to stay open at different points for different times. Has there been some security for you with the job that you have, being at a bigger company as opposed to being at the whim of a single restaurant?
Trying to get talking to Gerard about getting hired on to the niche company. I was stationed in Chicago at the time with my in-laws and my wife, because Gerard had shut down all the restaurants prior to the city shutting down, or the county at that. And, he was talking about, reopening the restaurants, and he just needed someone to kind of be in charge and help make these guidelines to reopen the restaurants kind of safely, securely, and just making sure, not only is our, staff comfortable coming into work during this time, but once we did open to the public, make sure the guests are well informed of what our precautions are, and making sure it's just a safe environment for everyone, front and back.
I imagine that's been stressful in its own way, just to feel responsible for people's health and not just their employment.
Yes, very much so, especially, reading the news every day from the last year. Every day is a different day, so you just don't know how to pivot each day or how you're going to the challenge of each day is just very dramatic, especially having not only restaurants in the county and the city of St. Louis, but we also have a Pastaria in Nashville. So being on top of what's going on in Nashville as well. So it's been definitely a stressful job.
Mira, so you're the executive editor of Sauce and responsible for this list of ones to watch that both Juwan and Justin came to our attention through. It's interesting hearing their stories. These are such different stories, and yet in each case, we're seeing people who are making it work in this weird time. Is that the through line through this issue?
I believe it is. I think everybody on the list, what they all have in common is that they, we check in with their employers and their former employers just to get a sense of what it was like to work with each individual ones to watch person. And everybody says they have the right attitude and the right work ethic. And these are all people that have the potential one day to own a restaurant, because of all the challenges a restaurant poses when you have a regular working environment. That's hard enough. And you get to a point where it's like a pandemic and all these challenges present themselves. The people on our list, we felt, have the most, the history of pivoting, adapting, and really working through challenges. So, Juwan, that's a perfect bridge to talk about what you're doing next. And I want to remind people, Juwan is just 19. I'm just blown away by this. You're purchasing a 6,000 square foot property in Tower Grove South. That's a huge space. What are your plans for that?
Yeah, so I don't want to give away too much that's going to be going on, but I want this space to be a space for creatives that are often overlooked. And so when a lot of people think of creatives, they think of people like painters, or they think of people like graphic design artists or stuff like that, or things like that. And I honestly believe that culinary is, one of the biggest attributes to the creative industry that gets overlooked. And so hence the term culinary arts, because it is an art form for people like me and Justin. And we're creating edible art. And so I want this space to be a place for creatives like myself to network with people that are into photography. So that way that you get into food photography with different chefs and stuff like that. And it'll just be an overall network for creatives like myself.
Those are some big plans. Justin, what are your plans or goals as you look into this next year and hopefully at some point the end of this pandemic?
You know what? With very grateful the job that I have and the opportunities that Gerard and the Niche Food Group have. It's definitely I'm able to hone in on my managing skills. So that's, even though I've had managerial positions in the past, but this one you're overseeing multiple restaurants and things like that. So I definitely just want to hone in on those skills for the next, 4 or 5 years, because creativity, I'm not bragging. I'm just like, okay, I've been in the restaurant industry long enough, but I need to hone on these. So if there is something in the future for me, then I have all the right weapons, if you will.
Justin, what's been your biggest takeaway from this past year of turmoil in the industry?
Don't be afraid to pivot and be creative. I mean, we're, at Brasserie, it's a French restaurant. So, but we're doing, French fried chicken every Monday, and we're opening the deli and the old Sardella space. So, like, recreating ourselves, being able to recreate and be creative, and just think outside the box. Like, during this time, people want so many different things, they just don't know it yet, and you're just trying to intrigue anyone and everyone to come eat at your restaurant or get takeout and feel that sense of security and that comfort from your food.
I feel like pivot is definitely the word of the year. Juwan, in just our final seconds here, anything you'd want to add to that thought?
No, Justin pretty much summed it up. One of the biggest things that I've seen is that pivot point. And so even when COVID first started and I was working with Bait, we are a fine dining restaurant. And so for us having to, package up our artistic plating or whatever it may be into a plastic container was quite difficult for us. And so just being able to pivot and make that pivot, you can definitely tell has impacted a lot of restaurants. Because the people that weren't able to make that pivot drastically were impacted a lot.
And
so
yet
I
here you are.
that is a staple.
You're still here. and that's, I think, the moral of this last year. The people who pivot, they continue to exceed. Juwan Rice of JR's Gourmet, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
And Justin McMillen, Director of Culinary Operations for the Niche Food Group, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Mira Nagarajan, Sauce Magazine Executive Editor, thank you again, as always.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on St. Louis on the Air, we'll get the highlights of a pandemic literature course now underway in Rolla. We'll talk to some St. Louisans who've gone crazy for the Kansas City Chiefs, and we'll get the latest on the state's efforts to garnish wages from people it mistakenly gave money to. More reporting from the St. Louis on the Air team is available at stlpublicradio.org or find us wherever you get your podcasts. St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU. Thank you for listening. I'm Sarah Fenske.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.